a lot more difficult for them to actually be helpful. So I think as we think about it, I don't have any solution, but the way I think about it at first is to say, what can we do to help repurpose those businesses to be able to strengthen our ability to go through this? Because it's going to be unfolding over the coming days, and we're yet to see what is possible. And we don't even know how far this is going. We've seen this, in China with a lot of structure and orderliness, with a very strong government. We've seen it in Italy, which has been, touted to have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. We're seeing it in the UK with different approaches being done. We're seeing it in the US. We don't know what a full-blown, pandemic will look like in most African cities. So I think we have to be thinking along that direction. The other thing I'll put on the table as an active player within the technology space in Africa is actually going to then be on the future. If we look beyond tomorrow, I think something that is going on at the moment is large-scale demonstration of technologies that we've all pushed back on. Large-scale experimentation, large-scale adoption of technologies that we've all pushed back on. And we've pushed back on these technologies for so many reasons. Some of it is due to things like privacy, some because we don't believe in change. Societies are not interested in change. Some is actually based on national security, because that's the fact. A lot of the technologies we use will become the platform for economic competitiveness of nations in years to come. But I think what we've seen in the last couple of days and weeks is that the adoption of these technologies have been deeply accelerated. And what we don't get is that this is going to be where nations are competing in future. I think Ojoma spoke about who owns your means of production, where today we're on Zoom. Zoom all of a sudden, from not being known by so many people in society, is now one of the most popular platforms for people to connect. And the implication of this is that a lot of the technologies that now power the world that we live in, unfortunately, and I'm not being nationalistic here, belongs to certain countries. So competitiveness in itself is going to change. We can think about the little solutions that we're building and get really excited about it. The face of competition will change after COVID-19. And as a nation, as a continent, we then also need to start to think, how do we accelerate our ability to actually generate knowledge, contribute to knowledge generation, but also contribute to how we apply science and technology to leapfrog development on our continent. If we don't do this and do it smartly, what will happen is that a lot of the economies on the continent will not have a say in the way the world is actually managed and structured. And because after this, the world in itself will be in panic, there won't be much conversation around things like privacy, around rights. The conversation will be, how do we kickstart things? And those with power will be those who can dictate the direction that we're going to go as a people. I think those two important things will be what I'd like to put on the table. As we think about it, some of the attendees might have ideas around this. But I think as we think about it, let's see the future as tomorrow. This is still evolving in Africa. But also when we think long term, let's think of how Africa will play within the science and technology and how we leapfrog the innovation ecosystem on the continent. Thanks for listening, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Bosu. I'd like to feed the mic to TD. TD, I'm muting your mic.
TD, did you just say TD?
Yes, I just said TD.
I'm supposed to be listening.
Yes, I mean, you're here, TD. You can't come here and not say something, so that we can move on to the Q&A.
I think when I listen to the words of Ndidi, I listen to the words of Bosun, I listen to what Idris has said, and and the other speakers, and I think I couldn't put anything any better than what they've already said. The only thing I think I know to share is this, and that is what we consider homegrown, or what we consider native, or what we consider local, because we're all looking at this from that ownership perspective, the us and them, because coronavirus started there and it's now been brought here, and we have to solve it here, etc. I think one of the things it is showing also is the nature of the globe and the fact that Africa and us as Africans belong to a global community. And that's why I like what Bosun had to say about the fact that whatever we do, we have to set it in that particular context. Now, we are solving local issues. We have to. As I'm speaking to you, I'm sitting with my 86-year-old mother in Yaba, Lagos, having lunch while using Zoom to have a conference with people from God knows how many different countries. That's the reality of today. And there are those who will come up with these solutions from within our shores because talent is equally spread. It is our responsibility to ensure that those that are capable of creating value are supported in doing that. And that is the only measure ultimately is value. And value is something that is intrinsic, it's something that's perceived, it's something that is realized. And as long as we continue to focus on delivering value to as many people as possible, for as long as possible, I think, yeah, we're gonna come out of this all right. But the focus has to be on people at all levels. Thanks.
Thank you, TD. Thank you, TD. Thank you so much. Mr. Charles Evenso is of the Lagos Business School. Before I turn on the mic for you, Charles, there's a London Business School report I was going to share at the beginning, but I didn't. There's actually a prediction that there's going to be a major recession, that the world is heading into a major recession, and that's from a London Business School report. I wanted to know, Mr. Charles, is there an intel from the Lagos Business School? Is there a report from the Lagos Business School that supports that? Is it prognosis now, diagnosis, whatever? Mr. Charles, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, go on. You're on.
Very good. Thank you very much for bringing me on. And hello, everyone.
Hello.
The question you ask is really a moot question because I think you probably don't need a lot of analysis to come to the conclusion that we are headed for a recession. I think I read yesterday that the German Minister for the Economy, or Finance Minister, I believe, unfortunately took his life because he was concerned about where the economy was going. And obviously, he's very, he was rather very unsure how things will pan out. I think he was very, it was clear to him that the prognosis was very bad, I think. So really, it's not about any analysis that anybody would do to shed more light on the reality that we face. I think more than anything else, it's about how do we respond to this? How do we begin now to prepare ourselves for the reality that we're faced with? Bosu made the point that the challenges will begin to manifest almost immediately, and I think that it's already beginning to show. In the Lagos Business School, we've had to, sort of shut down operations more or less and working remotely. We're using technology to teach, but obviously not at the same scale that we would not normally do. And therefore, I can already begin to see how that will impact on our business as an organization. But I think that most of the organizations, those in manufacturing, those in distribution, and many other areas will be definitely impacted negatively. The Nigerian situation is a bit more dire, I think, because even before the crisis hit us locally, we're already beginning to see the impact of it that is the impact, the global impact on our own fiscal situation. Obviously, with the rapid decline in the price of oil, with the NNPC GMD confessing on a TV program at some point that Nigeria had over 50 cargoes of crude oil unsold. I don't remember the last time we were shopping around to sell our oil. Many years ago, even on the spot market for crude oil, we were very strong players. And therefore, I think that all the signals are there for us. So the question again is, how do we respond? What can we begin to do? I think Ndidi has shared a lot of insights as to some of the ideas that we should be addressing our minds to. And I like what TD said about the fact that it's about people and, you know, focusing on people across all dimensions, all strata. My biggest concern is how this will affect jobs going forward, because we have an impaired fiscal system, as I said, and if we have serious job losses that are, and as I see it coming down the road, then it's going to be exacerbated. So we need to begin to think of how do we begin to address the prospect that there'll be job losses. This is also made worse by the fact that even in terms of considering programs by the government to ameliorate the possible impact of this, the capacity for government to fund anything at this point is highly, highly limited. And so we have a big challenge. I'm hoping that Cheta can perhaps, in the course of time, in the course of this conversation, you know, sort of dimension this a bit. But I think that one of the biggest challenges that this economy has always had, of course, the one thing is the fact that we have a very narrow productive capacity, rather, you know, a strong focus on a mono product, which is oil. And therefore, you know, the whole conversation around diversifying the economy is as old as we can imagine it to be. But I think that this is a time for us to begin to think very deeply about putting some of the plans or some of the ideas that have been shared in this respect into effect. And then beyond that, we all know that the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges we have with respect to helping businesses thrive in this environment is the policy environment. The policy environment for doing business in Nigeria is a huge challenge, and one that I think, if addressed squarely, will unlock a lot of capacity, a lot of potential for us to grow new businesses, help existing businesses to weather the storm, and therefore somewhat minimize the impact of potential job losses on the economy. So I think the conversation should focus a bit more on how we can help the current administration take more seriously the need to address the environment of business, as well as the structure of the economy. The structure of the economy itself really needs serious addressing. Now, it is what it is, not because of lack of ideas, but a lack of political will. So the focus again should be how to nudge government in the right direction in this respect. There's talk about new business models, and we then have to begin to think about what sort of skills, what sort of competencies need to be developed, need to be in order to support any business models that will emerge from this crisis. Again, you know, from a perspective of what what positives can we take out of it? We certainly need to begin to think about this. And then post this immediate crisis, I think that one thing we must not lose sight of is the fact that the world is going to a new normal. So we're probably going to be going from one difficulty to another from time to time. I think Bill Gates alluded to this in a recent presentation. And therefore, how do we build resilience for dealing with future crises? Because it's a reality that we have to accept. We have challenges in our health systems, in food security, in the capacity of our people to be productive. How do we address some of these challenges to prepare ourselves for the next crisis? I'll stop at that point and then see what ideas can be shared going forward. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Charles. I think at this point, it's okay for us to open up the channels. It's important that if you have conversation, if you have maybe if you have a comment on something that has been shared already, as a panelist, you can. But while we're doing that, I will also have read out the questions that some people have already sent in. But I think the floor is open now so that we can have the Q&A. So, but if you have anything you want to say, maybe in response to what has been said, you can unmute your mic and I'll let you go. Did you want to say something?
I think everybody has made some very good points. I just wanted to, buttress one point, which is I think that when we don't do enough across Africa, and I think a unique opportunity for us. I know there have been a lot of Nigerians on this call, but through nourishingafrica.com, our new initiative, what we've learned is that there's so much opportunity for cross-trade, cross-partnerships, and a lot more information sharing about how to deal with things. And I'll challenge all the entrepreneurs on this platform to think through how they can leverage this time using, obviously, technology tools to really start deepening our recognition of our economic potential as a continent and economic zones and how we can leverage them more appropriately. And I think that's just one low-hanging fruit that I don't think we fully utilized. And the second one is really around, I share a lot of the thoughts that Bosu mentioned. And I think that outside agriculture, I just think there's so much growth, even at this time with the creative industries. Ojoma was talking about this. I mean, I'll just give you one data point. All my friends in the US have written to me, asking me, I've finished all these Nollywood movies. I'll just give you one data point. All my friends in the US have written to me, asking me, I've finished all these Nollywood movies.
All right. I think, Bosu, I think you, Ndidi was the one who was talking, but I think you were also saying something. Perhaps while the rest of the panelists join, so you may just use the opportunity and say what you were saying. We already have 22 people here, 23, and number is actually climbing. So let's just conclude. Let us continue and do the Q&A while the rest of the panelists join back. Bosu, can you hear me?
Yes, Uche, I can hear you. Yeah, I think Ndidi was just giving a follow-on comment.
Okay, so you need to check your audio. It looks like your audio.
I'm quite close to my mic. Is it better?
I don't know if it's from me, but I think I can hear.
Is it better now? Hello? Uche?
Oh, okay. So it's from me then. Don't worry. So, Bosu, just go on.
Yeah. What can I say? Yeah, I wasn't saying anything, to be honest. I think if people have questions to ask, what I just did was, again, I wasn't also advising people on how to deal with this.
Okay.
Which may be disappointing. I think this is what I learned to startups that we work with. In terms of, I share how I personally and my family, how we're approaching this, which is in two folds. One is just understanding literally that this is, unfolding daily, even as an entrepreneur, because part of what I've seen in the last couple of days is people telling startups to quickly pivot and serve needs and demands in this time. That's the best way to go. And I've seen a couple where people actually do that, but what you find is you end up actually putting the little resources that you have into a service that may be needed, but no one is going to pay for. And I'm not saying that is bad, because that's what we need at the moment, for people to actually come together to solve this problem. But I think in terms of calling it business strategy, a lot is evolving, and what's the best of leaders are doing right now is also appreciating that a lot is evolving. The other side, obviously, is then for us to start to project at the end of it to say, if we come out of this, what will, and that's not saying I'm not hopeful, I think we will come out of it. What will the world look like? I think the bit I have to offer is that there's widespread adoption and testing of certain kind of technologies, which would automatically now become a part of it. That is going to change a lot of businesses. So many businesses will suffer as a result of that. And I think as a society, we need to start to come together to have clarity in terms of what we will do at the end of it, which is why I thought this webinar, the idea behind it in itself is quite good for us to start to project. I think there's a question, Uche, I don't know if you want to read this out. What is the best approach for a management consulting firm whose clients are mainly closing shop? I can share my own perspective on this. So I was talking to a friend that works in marketing communications, for instance. They're not far from consulting companies. And what I was suggesting is actually offering some of my own business, which in essence means that they need to start to think more like an innovation shop. And I gave a good example, and I'm going to use that example, which is a life example, to be honest. So this company works for MTN, for instance. MTN is one of their customers. And I was telling him that at this stage, I actually don't think the telcos, especially in a lot of African countries, are moving fast enough. Probably because they're still making a lot of money. But I think in a place like Nigeria, for example, there's opportunity for telcos to actually get involved in value transaction. Because right now, everything is going digital, everything is going virtual. And there's so many services that telcos have not been able to deliver in Nigeria. Also because there's the level of attention being paid to privacy is not high. So for instance, I think telcos could help in mapping people, helping to know where people are at the moment. Simple question pulling on their platform can help map people. And what that will mean is when people need services, telcos can literally become the platforms and the engines to help get people's needs across to them in society. What that would mean is it may unlock some of the things that banks and governments in places like Nigeria is stop them from doing, like mobile money, the likes of M-Pesa that you have in East Africa. If they're able to build an infrastructure to connect people to value, the reality of the world today may mean that we won't have a choice but to allow them play in that space. So telcos, we need people to help them think through that. I think consulting companies can also take that position right now, where we help you help your companies, the companies you serve, to better understand emerging opportunities and how to quickly position for some of these opportunities if they have the resources.
Great, thanks, Boso. Okay, Kamal, you have a question. I think you can type your question. Hello, Kamal. Hello.
Oh, yes.
Hello, Kamal. Yeah, go ahead and ask the question.
Yes, I'm just about to type it right now.
Go ahead.
So the question is for Mr. Idris.
Okay.
So I just typed it now.
Okay, if it's for Idris, Idris is still trying to log back in.
Oh, okay. I specifically mentioned Idris because he was the one who mentioned the need for countries to invest in local production so as to, to survive during a pandemic like this. So I'm just curious to know if developing countries have enough funding to heavily invest in human capital and power generation to boost local production. Because it requires. I want to believe the IOI of investing human capital take up to decades. For example, China, for China to become the manufacturer hub of the world, it takes probably 3 decades. So does it worth it investing a lot just so to curb possible pandemic?
All right, I think that Bosu can also answer this question really. So Bosu, you want to take it?
Absolutely. It's actually a point that came up on a WhatsApp group, which I'm a part of. So there's this video that has been going around on how, China is benefiting from this. And my own theory is totally different. I actually don't think, I think this is going to be bad for China eventually. Because if there's one of the things that we're going to learn from this, the pandemic, is the fact that we can't totally outsource manufacturing and production to a particular country or region. What this is demonstrated to the world is that every country will need to have the capacity to manufacture. You've seen how Germany and UK mandated all their manufacturing companies to start to produce ventilators. If they had phased out everything completely, that would have been a disaster because they would then need to rely on China for the production. So I think in a way it's bad news for China. If you ask me, yes, of course, the cost of setting up manufacturing plants and things like that takes a while. Knowledge transfer is going to be an issue. But bear in mind that China didn't start it. Even countries like Nigeria used to have some element of manufacturing. We had proper textile industry in some parts, which they invest in. China wasn't responsible for their debt, obviously. But it's not that much of a rocket science. I think what you begin to see with this development indeed is that countries will prioritize local manufacturing. And it's gonna force a lot of countries to look inward. Resources will go into it as well, because no one will just want to wait on things coming from China. A good example, I'm currently in the UK. People have to sanitize their products if you buy from Amazon now. That's the level of fear because the bulk of the product on Amazon, they're from China. And there's that mentality that you can't even trust this product. You don't want to touch them. So people actually do sanitize products. So you can imagine what that is going to do to the mentality of people and what that would do to local manufacturing.
Okay, Cheta wants to go with this. Cheta wants to contribute to that.
Yeah.
So the question is whether we have muscle, whether Africa has the muscle to be able to develop local manufacturing.
So here's the thing. Many of us, and sorry that I dropped off for a while after the last time that the call broke. A client of mine called, so I had to attend to that first. Apologies once again. Now, yes, while there will certainly be a desire to dump manufacturing from places like China, or at least to minimize the risk. The question that we as Africans should be asking is, do we have the ability to do it? So we recently have signed an agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and it appears that. Pardon me.
Go on. I know you.
Yeah. It appears that quite some of the bigger countries are a bit cool on it. It took South Africa a long time to fully commit to it, and Nigeria was even longer. And shortly, the irony of the whole thing was shortly after Nigeria signed the agreement, Nigeria closed its borders. So we have one of the first things that we have to do before we even start talking of manufacturing capacity is to make sure that we can trade with one another. I think it's a bit shameful that African countries at the moment do more of their trade with external actors than within ourselves. And as long as we don't do that, we can never get to that level where comparative advantage will make manufacturing cheaper here. And that's what people must look at. It's one thing to have a wish list and say, oh, we want to do manufacturing here. It's another thing for us to be practical about it and say, will the manufacturing be cheaper? Would a piece of cloth manufactured in a textile mill in Kaduna be cheaper than something that is brought all the way from China? Because at the end of the day, there's a reason why imports from China killed manufactured clothes, manufactured textiles in Kaduna and Kano. And those are things that we must practically look at. So the first thing that will be important for us when this is over is how do we, as a matter of urgency, fix transport infrastructure within the continent? That's the very first thing we should be looking at, in my view. Thank you.
There's another question here. It's from Abdul Samid. He says, hello, everybody. This is Abdul Samad from Tamkin Incubator in Morocco. My deepest concern is in these hard times for startups is how to keep the right mindset to face up these challenges and at the same time keep connected to the needs and versatility of the market. These skills and capabilities are hard to cultivate for startups. How can we help help them this way? I mean, Bosu, I don't know if you got that question.
Uche, can you summarize the question if you can? Otherwise, I can read through it myself to face understanding.
Okay, so basically, he's saying, how can we help start? I think it's about more of emotional support. The startups are going through a lot in this period. That how can we do more to help startups, especially given the I think you wanted to talk about volatility of the market.
The market, well, to startup conversations again. On COVID-19, I choose not to be an expert in anything, to be honest. I choose not to be an expert in anything because I think a lot is changing, and we don't know how this is going to affect our behaviors, nor even the market. So if I use the example of us at CC Hub, where we support startups across quite a number of locations, we've had to shut down our co-working space for the last 2 weeks. We didn't wait for the government. We won in Lagos, in Nairobi, in Kigali. Because we're a high-risk location, people congregate. We see a lot of people from foreign countries. As like 3 weeks ago, there were still so many people from Asia at IOB in Nairobi. So we figured that we should shut down, and part of the request we've been getting from our users is whether we'll suspend their rent, which is something we think we should do. But the question is, we suspend the rent, what's going to happen to also CC in 3 months' time if the landlord is still expecting us to pay rent? And that's a significant amount of money. It's not small money on a monthly basis. So as much as I can tell you that I'll suspend the rent, which is what we're going to do for those guys, we can also pick up a lot of other support. We've created support groups for startup founders within our ecosystem. We've even acquired discounts on telemedicine platform for everyone within our ecosystem, just so that people can get support eventually when they need it. But if we don't know where we're going to be in 3 months' time, that in itself is a big question. And the example I gave of where my wife works when I talked a few minutes ago is a great example. We don't know what tomorrow morning is going to bring on this matter. So I think the best we can do is, as a community, continue to bind and stick together. Perhaps try to have conversations like these, and hopefully we can continue to figure out how to manage every day and every week as we get along, and hope that we can there will be a solution to Corona very soon.
Thank you. Okay, this new era is showing to an extent that a lot of businesses can go online and be digital with minimal cost to the business owners. What's the viable minimum product or quality startups should brace for post-COVID pandemic?
Okay, that sounds like a startup question.
Yeah, can I say something there? I think we are Cheta here. I think that's a question that can only be answered after the pandemic is over.
Absolutely. But one thing I can also lend here that I've been doing personally is I suspect that there's going to be a lot of assumption that social infrastructure won't be as important after the pandemic. And I think as humans, social infrastructure has always been a major part of how we build successful society. As a matter of fact, research is proving that societies where social infrastructure are weak, that what you tend to find is that development is also weak. So places where you don't have intentionally built restaurants, supermarkets, pubs, parks, you find that development is also always quite weak, and you can benchmark that whichever way you want to benchmark it. But it's the fact. The reason for that is that people don't have quality spaces where they can actually have proper conversation, build relationships that they can build stuff based on. Of course, internet is showing us that we can still have conversation online, but the level of trust, as you can see on platforms like Twitter and so, quite low. So I think what we should be expecting is that as much as startups would leverage digital solutions to provide services, startups should still build their businesses as strong social infrastructure, which is always the thesis that we use when we invest at CCO. A lot of the startups that we've seeded and invested in, the infrastructure for society, the likes of Lifebank, for instance, which is playing a major role at the moment, or say Drugstock, for instance, or Headvis, which is in education. So I think as much as startups start to think digital, we still need to think that humanity will need strong and authentic social infrastructure, and we can embed that in how we build our solutions.
Awesome, thank you. There was a question for Idris while he was out, and Idris just joined back. So let me just pop that question straight to him.
Sure.
If the guy is still around, he says, Mr. Idris mentioned the need for countries around the world to invest in local production to curb a pandemic. I'm curious to know if developing countries have enough funding to heavily invest in human capital and power generation to boost local production. Idris, he says the return on investment of investing in human capital may take up to a decade. Does it worth investing in human capital to boost local production because of possible pandemic, which takes between 6 months to 1 year to resolve?
So the answer is yes. And it's not just for a pandemic. There are just some things that are just so basic. So for instance, I spent some time in Tunisia last year, and when you compare, so I spent Tunisia, and I spent some time in Egypt and in Nigeria and a few other countries. And when you compare a country like Tunisia to Nigeria, right, even with a small population and the amount of local research, local manufacturing, local engineering that goes on, and compared to what Nigeria has, there's a huge gap for big countries like Nigeria. And so it goes even beyond having a pandemic. We have to locally be able to do some things right. So for the past couple of days, people have been coming up elsewhere, providing with designs of of ventilators. So we had a contact from Mahindra in India who was willing to provide us with designs for ventilators if we could find local manufacturers in Nigeria to do that. That was a tough task. So again, it goes beyond pandemic. There's something that's so fundamental, but it's not just about we don't start from the manufacturing. I think we have to step back to the education space, right? If you don't build a solid base for science, a solid base for engineering, then you do not have the human capital to call upon in situations like this. Like the situation in Tunisia, so 150 women locked themselves up in that manufacturing outfit to churn out 500,000 masks daily because you have built the capacity. So, and again, some of this now is just about even university education. It's about technical education. So I think opportunities like this offers a reset for us to go back and see what do we need to do differently. We always complain we don't have enough money to build those infrastructure. But well, tell you what, in this crisis, money is coming out. So people are actually bringing out money because there is a need. So I think we need to now leverage the opportunity to look at the fundamentals, not just the fire brigade approach, which would fail us at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thanks. I have this question myself. I have seen, and this is like feeding off most of the conversation so far. In the course of preparing or trying to contain the pandemic, we've seen a lot of efforts, both privately and from the government, but much more from private. We've seen a lot of effort by the innovation community, and especially in the hubs, trying in the different manufacturing sectors and hubs, trying to build locally some of the materials that is required to fight this epidemic. Don't we think that post-pandemic there should be a proper harnessing of this capacities that we're building now during this pandemic? Because I want to take this back to what happened during the the history of the Biafran War. You notice that there were lots of ingenuities during the war that after the war we couldn't use as a nation. What are we learning from those? Bosu, you can
So
chime in
sadly,
here. Anybody?
Yeah. Okay, so quickly, sadly, the only thing sometimes we learn from history is that we learn nothing, right? So everybody's concerned right now. Things ease out in a few months, and we go back to our lives, and that's the challenge. So I was saying, if Guarantee Trust Bank could help set up a hospital in a couple of days, then that means there's some capacity there that's not been leveraged, right? I think part of the challenge is twofold. You have the arrogance of we know it all, we don't need your help. But also from the private sector, we have this askance, aloof stuff. As long as my own business is running, well, you can make your bad policies, you can build your poor infrastructures until things like this happen. So I think on all sides, we just have to be willing to take tough steps and really build together after this.
Just to add to that, I think we will actually learn. This is the reality. I think nations will learn different things, though. That's my own personal take. You have the more advanced nations that will learn. For instance, that there are certain capacities that they have that they can turn them into capacities that can be anti-fragile. So literally capacities that are not only focused on the good days, but you can also repurpose them for bad days for you to keep running. And what that will mean is that they will become more resilient. We will probably see new business models as well. When you have car manufacturing companies now making ventilators, so they will understand that the machineries that they have there, they know, but they've never probably thought of being able to build their business model around being anti-fragile. So you'll find that will happen a lot. I think humanity will learn significantly from them. In terms of Africa and a few countries like Nigeria, just using examples, I think we'll learn as well. One thing that has always been there is that when you look at politics and business in a country like Nigeria, the bar is typically low. So what you get is that people who make it into government over the years don't see the need to often engage technocrats. They do engage some of them. You can see the person that is leading NCDC. We've seen great examples of really good technocrats being brought into government. But I think if there's anything that is going to be clear from what we've seen, is that even politicians will start to somewhat get the memo that you need to still have people who can solve solutions. And where I think the particular clarity will come from will actually be in public-private partnership. There's been a lot of attempt by the innovation community to engage government. Some are successful, depending on how more patient they are and connected to government. Some not necessarily successful because you need to go the long goal, and not everybody has that capacity. I think what you're going to begin to see is that there will be more willingness on both sides to push a little to make sure that things can work for society. You know, a good example today, you know, NIMA is not meant to be testing. It's the only medical research institute in Nigeria. But LifeBank stepped in to help them set up the first drive-through testing center in Nigeria. And they've actually piloted that today. CC Hub happened to build the form that they use for registration of patients at that site. From the feedback that I've just, you know, gotten, there's been over 200 people sign up on that platform. Today, I think about 56 or so were seen. I'm not sure how many were seen, but about 56 actually signed up on that platform today at NIMA. LifeBank is not getting paid. LifeBank is actually bringing money into the loop. CCL didn't get paid for the form as well. Nobody is getting paid. I think if this becomes a successful model, you may find that the information and knowledge on how to set up drive-through testing center for Corona that will be launched across Nigeria in the coming weeks may end up coming from this experiment. So those use cases are the things that I think we're going to see more of in a situation like this. And I think it will soften the relationship a little. It will soften it a little. So nations will learn, but will learn different things.
Awesome. Cheta, you have something to add to this? Your hand has been up.
Yes, well, I have quite a lot to say. One of the things that, so we are beginning to see green shoots of collaboration, which is very important. One of the things that we've not done very well over the last is to collaborate. We tend to have this thing of I want to have my 1 billion instead of understanding. Or sorry, I want to have my 1 million instead of understanding that 10% of 1 billion is actually more than 1 million. So that's something that needs to be done a lot more. Collaboration. We also need a supreme mindset change. So as an example, one thing, we're having this meeting now. Yes, there have been issues that the meeting has been cut off twice by service. People have dropped off, come back on. But nevertheless, it's what it shows, the fact that a lot of people, even in this part of the world that is not as connected as the rest of the world, the fact that a lot of people have been able to move online and start working, continue working, it shows that the need for face-to-face meetings is not as great as people think. One thing, in my line of work, I travel a lot, and there are many times that I go for a meeting. I live in Lagos, I go for a meeting in Abuja, I've gone for a meeting in Nairobi, and I'm like, I didn't need to be here. I didn't need to get on a plane. We could have easily done this meeting online. And if anything, this pandemic has shown that yes, it can be done. So when we do things like that, we tend towards efficiency. That's something we have to start demanding more and more often, efficiency, as opposed to waffling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you have final thoughts, you can drop. I like to appreciate you all for being able to come back and to conclude this stuff. But if you have final thoughts, you can use this few minutes to drop them, and we can round off the conversation. Bosun, Idris, you have final thoughts?
Sure. I think what I would just like to say to everyone that is listening is to bring back a concept that I spoke about at Platform, I think about 2 years ago. That for continents like Africa to move forward, we need unlikely leaders. And leadership should never be seen as something that needs to come just from the government. I think the private sector should also lead. The people within the creative industry should also lead. The smartest of people around us in our society should spend their time building. I think Africa needs to build deeply. If you look around you, you see that our systems are deeply weak. And this weakness, at times, we may look at them as challenges. I think it's about time that we start to see them as significant opportunities to build the future. Not only build the future to actually make money just for yourself, but to build the future that can help make our society a lot more resilient. We can see from this pandemic that as a people, we have really, really weak systems. We do have weak systems. And that may mean the line between life and death for a lot of our people. So if you're amongst the smartest of the smartest, you've been gifted, I think we should put our resources and our intellectual ability into building solutions for the society. And as we all leave this call as well, let's not think we've seen the end of Corona. I think we all need to be thinking, what can you do within your community where you are today to make your community a lot more resilient? We've been told to all stay indoors, but that's actually not how societies survive. We survive through social ties. You should definitely stay indoors, but from where you're staying, what can you do? What can you bring to the table that will improve the chance or give more chances to people around you? We need to apply that thinking with this problem, but also moving forward, we need to build for our society is important.
Okay.
Awesome.
So
Thank
my
you so
part,
much,
I think
Okay, Idris, yeah. Go on, Idris.
yes. So I think we also, as technical folks, as techies, need to also think about how do we bring our skills into other sectors of the community, right? It's good to build apps, to build a lot of these things, but some of the fundamentals, so take food, like I needed to speak about earlier. So I spend about 5-6 hours a day just talking about cattle. Some people might know, we do run a cattle ranch in Kefi, and it was just something that was on the side. But in the past 2-3 weeks, it's actually taking more of our time than actually our tech stuff because people have to eat, and it's tough now, right? So again, it's something that I don't need with it's a small part of my time to before. We're now suddenly saying that in things like this it could be the difference between life and death. And so I think in our communities, we have to also look at other areas. Just the same way you have auto manufacturers thinking about ventilators, we also as techies need to look at all the basic problems in the community that we have left to others that we probably could bring in our skills and know-how in scaling up. Thanks.
Awesome thoughts, Idris. Let me just add before Cheta does gets on is the fact that the tech ecosystem needs to be a lot more open and involving, because a lot of what we see is that the people who run tech ecosystem are a bit in cocoons and not understanding that tech in itself is an enabler. So and for you to be able to solve problems or enable anything, you need to be part of that stuff. So if we cannot expand and bring in people from the health, from the law, from finance, from accounting, from what have you, include them in the tech ecosystem, it becomes difficult to expand. I mean, a lot of the issues we're talking about are things that we can actually solve using technology. That's my thought, right? So, but Cheta, let me hear your final thoughts.
My final thought is we need to, so number one of the things that we do not do nearly enough of in this part of the world is lobbying. We actually need to do quite a lot of lobbying if we're to. So it brings me right back to what we talked about at the beginning of the discussion. If we don't lobby enough, we won't get our voices heard, we won't get our agenda pushed through. We need to be quite realistic about some of these things. Everybody has an agenda. So if your agenda isn't pushed through, you are not going anywhere. One. Number two, political risk. We tend to be very blasé about political risk. So let me give a practical example. The governor of Oyo State has just tested positive for COVID. So as of this moment, we have 4 state governors in Nigeria who are positive for this virus. They're in isolation. Now, when you look at the way Nigeria works, the power structures are very top heavy. If Oga is not around, if Oga is not in the room, a lot of things don't get done. So we're actually facing a severe political risk that things may not get done in terms of fighting this pandemic. We need to factor that in because it creates a gap that we must step into. Otherwise, things will go out of hand. And then when this thing is over, we need to start planning with the mindset of this thing will be over someday. What happens when it's over? When it's over, how do we get our own agenda put on the table. These are very important things, so we should not be shy about discussing them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. At this point, I just had to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. My sincere apologies for the break, for the network hitches. I still don't understand what happens. Perhaps after now, I'll find out why that happened. But thank you for being able to come back, waiting to come back. We hope that we can have more of this sort of conversations, in the future. But most importantly, I want to think that we are able to, be conscious of what is happening right now so that we're able to
Uche, are you still on the call?
It went silent.
Lost him.
Yeah, I think we've lost him again. We can, on behalf of Uche, say thank you to everyone for attending. I think the questions have been quite thought-provoking. Thank you guys. I can see the names from all over Africa. Thank you for attending. Thank you.